When I took the job at Lost Creek Cottage, I thought it was just a quiet place in the Oklahoma woods. But then came the rules, strange, unsettling rules etched on rotting parchment. Don't answer the door after midnight. Don't feed the man in the well. And never ever go into the basement, no matter how loudly she screams. I thought I could ignore them. I was wrong. Something ancient lives here, and it knows when the rules are broken. Now I'm trapped in a nightmare where every creak of the floorboards might be my last warning. Hey there, night owls. Welcome back to Dr. Snooze, where sleep is optional and the nightmares are real. If you're into creepy stories, strange rules, and things that go bump in the night, you're in the right place. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone who loves a good scare. All right, you know the drill. Lights off, headphones in, get comfortable, because the story starts now. It was early September when I first arrived at Lost Creek Cottage. The air still clung to the last wisps of summer warmth, but the skies had already begun to turn that soft, restless gray that hinted at the coming chill. I had driven for nearly 5 hours across the Oklahoma plains, weaving through narrow back roads until my GPS stopped working entirely. There were no signs, no road markers, just endless pine trees, old barbed wire fences, and a single gravel path that eventually opened into a clearing. There it was, Lost Creek Cottage. It looked nothing like what the online listing had shown. The pictures made it appear quaint and rustic, like something out of a travel magazine. But standing before it in real life, the cottage seemed worn down by time. The wooden beams were weathered, the porch sagged slightly in the middle, and the shutters hung crooked. Still, there was something oddly inviting about it. It looked lonely, forgotten. And maybe that's why I felt drawn to it. I was hired through a site that specialized in remote job placements. The posting was vague. Caretaker needed for historic property. Quiet surroundings, housing and food included. 1 month minimum. I was broke, unemployed, and fresh out of a long breakup, so the idea of being alone in the woods with no responsibilities other than taking care of a house sounded like a much-needed escape. A man named Mr. Harland had called me after I applied. His voice was deep and scratchy, like someone who had smoked too many cigarettes over too many years. He didn't ask much, just if I could follow instructions and if I believed in keeping to tradition. I said yes to both, and he gave me the address. No interview, no questions. When I pulled my suitcase up the creaking steps of the porch, I found the front door unlocked. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of pine and old wood. It wasn't dusty like I expected. In fact, everything was surprisingly clean. There was a fireplace with a neat stack of wood beside it, an old rocking chair, a small kitchenette, and a bedroom just off to the side with a made-up bed. Someone had definitely been keeping this place in order. On the kitchen table sat a small binder labeled Caretaker's Handbook. I flipped it open and found a single sheet of paper tucked into the front sleeve. It read, "Welcome to Lost Creek Cottage. These rules must be followed without exception. Failure to comply will result in serious consequences. 1. Do not go outside between 1:33 a.m. and 3:03 a.m. 2. If you hear knocking on the back door after dark, do not open it, ever. 3. The wind chimes on the porch must remain undisturbed. If they stop ringing, check the attic immediately. 4. Every Sunday at exactly 4:44 p.m., place a saucer of milk on the front porch and close the door. Do not look outside until 5:10 p.m. 5. If the radio in the living room turns on by itself, listen. Write down everything it says. Burn the paper before sunrise. 6. The mirror in the hallway is not to be covered. Do not attempt to remove it. If your reflection blinks, leave the house and return in 10 minutes. 7. On your last day, leave a letter for the next caretaker in the kitchen drawer. Do not speak of your experience aloud. I read the list again, thinking it had to be a joke. Maybe a prank to scare off city folk. I even laughed to myself, shaking my head. It didn't help that the final note at the bottom of the page said, "You'll be safe as long as you follow the rules. MH." I closed the binder, deciding to treat it like a quirky tradition rather than something to be taken seriously. After all, I had stayed in weird places before. Haunted hotels, abandoned cabins, even a summer in an old church converted into a hostel. People like to make up stories to keep a place interesting. That's all this was. My first night was uneventful. I made dinner, canned soup and toast, and sat by the fireplace with an old book I found on the shelf. The silence was comforting. No city noise, no notifications, no voices, just the occasional hoot of an owl or the gentle tinkling of the wind chimes outside. Around midnight, I got into bed and drifted into a deep sleep. Then came the knocking. 3 slow knocks just after 2 a.m. from the back door. I sat bolt upright, my heart hammering in my chest. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. My first thought was that someone was playing a prank, or maybe I was dreaming. I got up slowly and tiptoed to the back door, but didn't dare touch the handle. Knock, knock, knock. 3 more, steady and deliberate. I remembered the rule. If you hear knocking on the back door after dark, do not open it, ever. I backed away, retreating into the bedroom and closing the door behind me. My pulse thudded in my ears as I crawled back into bed. I told myself it had to be an animal or the wind, but deep down I knew it wasn't. By morning, everything seemed normal again. The back door was closed. No signs of anything unusual. No footprints in the dirt. Nothing. Still, the binder remained open on the kitchen table, as if reminding me, this isn't just a quirky tradition. The second day passed quietly. I spent it exploring the surrounding woods, noting the dense thickets and small stream that ran near the edge of the property. I didn't see another human being all day. No cars, no hikers, nothing. Later that evening, while washing dishes, I heard the wind chimes stop. They had been clinking softly all day in the breeze, but now they were silent. I froze. If they stopped ringing, check the attic immediately. I had seen the attic door in the hallway ceiling, just a pull string away from being opened. Dread pooled in my stomach as I dried my hands and walked toward the hallway. The silence in the house grew heavier with every step. I reached up, grabbed the cord, and tugged. The ladder creaked as it unfolded. The attic was dark, but a flashlight hung nearby. I climbed slowly, each step echoing through the stillness. The attic was surprisingly clean, with rows of old furniture covered in white sheets. A single rocking chair sat in the far corner. Empty. No sign of anything strange. No creatures. No broken window. No reason for the wind chimes to have stopped. I stayed up there for a few minutes listening, waiting. Then, just as I turned to leave, I saw something carved into one of the wooden beams near the roof. Don't trust your reflection. That night, I covered the hallway mirror with a bedsheet. I wish I hadn't, because the next morning, the sheet was on the floor. And my reflection was smiling while I wasn't. I stood frozen in front of the mirror, my breath hitching in my throat. My reflection was smiling, but I wasn't. My mouth was still, pressed into a confused, terrified line. My eyes stared back at me in disbelief, but the reflection's eyes shimmered with some wicked amusement, its grin wide and unsettling. Then, just like that, the mirror blinked. I stumbled backward and nearly tripped over my own feet, slamming into the wall behind me. The sheet I had used to cover the mirror lay crumpled on the floor like it had been yanked off. My instincts screamed at me to run, to leave this place immediately. But something else, some sick curiosity or stubbornness, kept me there. I remembered the rule. If your reflection blinks, leave the house and return in 10 minutes. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my keys, rushed out the front door, and stood panting in the clearing. I kept glancing back over my shoulder, half expecting the front door to open on its own, or the reflection to appear behind the glass window. But nothing moved. The house just sat there, old and silent, like it had been waiting for me to break the rules. I didn't dare go far, just paced around the gravel path leading up to the woods, watching the minutes crawl by on my phone. 10 minutes never felt so long. When the time was finally up, I took a deep breath and walked back inside. Everything looked normal again. The mirror was just a mirror. My reflection matched me this time, pale, shaken, and exhausted. I stared at it for several seconds to be sure. No blink, no grin, just me. But I kept the sheet close by, just in case. That afternoon, a strange unease settled in my chest. The sky outside had taken on a weird reddish hue, like the sun was filtering through something thick and unnatural. I tried to distract myself, sweeping the floors, dusting, even reorganizing the books on the shelves. But no matter what I did, I felt watched. The air inside the cottage felt heavier, almost like it was pressing down on me. I kept going back to the binder, reading the rules over and over again. None of this should have been real, and yet Everything was happening exactly as written. That night, I made a decision. I would follow the rules exactly, no matter how ridiculous they seemed. This place was testing me, and I didn't want to find out what happened if I failed. Just after sunset, the radio in the living room turned on by itself. It crackled with static at first, then a slow, old-timey voice broke through. He waits in the well. The third stone is loose. Do not let the child speak. Do not drink from the cup. The sky will open soon. The message repeated, then cut off mid-sentence. Silence. The old radio light flickered and went dark again. I sat completely still, my notebook trembling in my hand. I had written down every word. I didn't know what it meant, what child, what well. But I didn't question it. I took the page, went outside to the fire pit behind the cottage, and burned it, just like the rules said. The paper curled and blackened in seconds, releasing a strange, bitter smell as it vanished into ash. I tried to sleep after that, but every creak of the floor, every gust of wind against the window kept me wide awake. At exactly 2:17 a.m., I heard the knocking again. 3 knocks. Back door. I didn't move from the bed. I just pulled the covers over my head like a child hiding from monsters and stared at the bedroom door. It lasted for a while this time. Knock, knock, knock. Then silence. Then something new. Scraping, like nails dragging down the wooden back door. Slow, deliberate. Then something whispered my name. It didn't call out loudly. It whispered, like it was trying to draw me in. Like it already knew I was awake and listening. My name again. Closer this time. I bit my lip to stop myself from screaming. I curled tighter under the blanket, eyes squeezed shut. Eventually, it stopped. When I woke up in the morning, the back door had long, deep scratches etched across it, 4 of them like claw marks. But the lock was still in place. Nothing was broken. Whatever it was, it hadn't gotten in. I thought about quitting right then and there, but something told me that leaving wouldn't be that easy. On Sunday afternoon, I remembered the next rule. Every Sunday at exactly 4:44 p.m., place a saucer of milk on the front porch and close the door. Do not look outside until 5:10 p.m. It sounded ridiculous, but I wasn't about to risk skipping it. I checked my phone constantly, pacing around the kitchen until the clock struck 4:44. I filled an old china saucer from the cabinet with milk and opened the front door. The air outside had changed again. It was still daylight, but wrong, too quiet. Even the birds were gone. I placed the saucer down on the wooden porch, stepped back inside, and shut the door. Then I locked it and waited. Time passed slowly. Each second ticked like an eternity. I wanted so badly to peek, just a quick glance through the curtains, but I didn't. Instead, I sat on the living room floor and stared at my phone. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. At 5:10 p.m., I opened the door again. The saucer was empty. Not just the milk gone, the entire saucer was gone. No trace of it at all, like it had never been there. I looked around. No footprints, no wind, just the sound of the chimes swaying gently in the breeze again. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning brought something even stranger. There was a letter, folded neatly and placed on the kitchen table, right beside the binder. I hadn't left it there. My name was written on the outside in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside it simply read, "You're doing well, but the mirror isn't done with you yet. Watch for the second smile." No signature. I searched the house from top to bottom, every cabinet, every drawer, the attic, nothing. No sign of anyone having entered. All the doors were locked, the windows were shut, but someone or something had left that note. And what did they mean by second smile? Was it another warning? I didn't want to find out, but I knew I would, because later that night I passed by the hallway mirror on my way to bed, and my reflection was no longer alone. There was something standing behind me. I stood in the hallway, staring at the mirror, breath caught in my throat. My reflection stood exactly where it should, every movement in sync with my own. But behind it, just over my shoulder, stood a figure. Tall, unmoving, vague like a shadow blurred at the edges, as if it didn't fully belong in this world. I turned around instantly. Nothing. The hallway behind me was empty, but when I looked back at the mirror, it was still there, watching. Closer now. And that's when I saw it. That second smile. It wasn't on my reflection. It wasn't even on the shadow behind me. It was on the wall inside the mirror, drawn in something dark and glossy, shaped like a wide crescent curve with too many teeth. a smile where no mouth should be. I stumbled back and nearly tripped over a loose floorboard. My heart thundered in my chest, and I couldn't stop shaking. I remembered the letter. Watch for the second smile. It was a warning, not a riddle. I grabbed the sheet I had used before and threw it back over the mirror, using tape this time to make sure it stayed. I didn't care about the rule against covering it. I was done staring into that thing. I considered calling Mr. Harlan, the man who had hired me, but I didn't have his number anymore. His only contact had been through a burner phone app that deleted the thread after our initial conversation. I had no way of reaching anyone, and yet someone had left that letter. Someone was watching me, helping me, or maybe just playing with me. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house shifted again. The light coming in through the windows was dimmer, despite the sun shining outside. The corners of each room seemed to stretch a little farther than they had the day before, and my footsteps echoed faintly even on the carpeted floor. Everything felt wrong. I tried to hold myself together by sticking to a routine. I made breakfast. I dusted the fireplace. I opened the windows, but the wind didn't come through like it normally did. The trees outside barely moved. The wind chimes were silent, even though I could see them swaying. That silence wasn't comforting anymore. It was oppressive. Later that day, I heard a child laughing. It came from the woods. I froze mid-step in the living room and turned toward the back window. I couldn't see anything through the thick trees, but the laughter was clear. It was soft, playful, like a little girl playing tag. And then it stopped. The rule came crashing into my memory. Do not let the child speak. What child? Was this the one mentioned in the radio message? I slowly walked to the front door and cracked it open. She was standing at the edge of the clearing, a girl no older than 7, wearing a white dress with bare feet, her skin pale as porcelain. She stared straight at the cottage. At me. She smiled. I didn't speak. I didn't wave. I didn't move. Neither did she. The moment lasted far too long. Her smile didn't fade. It just stayed frozen there, too wide, too still. Then her mouth opened. I slammed the door shut and locked it, pressing my back against it like it could protect me from whatever was out there. I didn't want to know what would have happened if she had spoken. That night, the rules bled into each other. I tried to stay awake, but sleep pulled at me like invisible hands. At some point after midnight, I passed out in the rocking chair by the fireplace. When I woke up, the house was dead silent. The digital clock on the mantel read 1:41 a.m. The danger hour. Panic hit me in the chest. I had fallen asleep during the forbidden time. Rule number 1, do not go outside between 1:33 a.m. and 3:03 a.m. The room was too dark. Not normal night dark, wrong dark. Like the shadows had thickened and multiplied, curling into the corners like something alive. The air smelled strange, like copper and wet earth. I heard footsteps upstairs. Soft, barefoot. There was no upstairs. The attic. A faint dragging sound followed, like something heavy being pulled across the floorboards. Then, silence. The wind chimes stopped. If they stopped ringing, check the attic immediately. But I wasn't about to go up there. Not during the danger hour. That felt like a trap. Instead, I grabbed the flashlight and waited near the front door, gripping the handle like I'd need to bolt at any second. Then came the radio. It turned on again by itself. This time, no static. Just a voice. A different one. A child's voice. Don't cover the mirror. You made it angry. Then the station changed on its own. Now it was Mr. Harlan's voice. If it smiles again, don't blink. If you blink, it can come through. The radio clicked off. I couldn't breathe. The air felt thick in my lungs, like I was inhaling smoke. That's when the hallway mirror sheet began to ripple, like wind or breathing from the inside. And then it dropped to the floor, perfectly folded. The mirror was uncovered again, and my reflection was already staring at me from the hallway, even though I wasn't standing there. I backed away slowly. The reflection in the mirror didn't move. It just smiled, wider than humanly possible. And I remembered the warning, don't blink. My eyes burned as I stared. The reflection's eyes glowed faintly. The same second smile appeared on the wall behind it, a mouth with teeth, too many teeth. Then I blinked for just a second, but it was enough. My reflection vanished, not faded, gone. The mirror was empty, and then I heard a sound behind me, breathing. I didn't want to turn around. Whatever was breathing behind me, it wasn't human. Each inhale was raspy, guttural, and slow, like something enormous trying to suppress a growl. The air grew colder with every second, and I could feel it hovering just inches from the back of my neck. The hallway mirror still stood in front of me, but it no longer reflected anything. No room, no hallway, no me, just blackness. I took a trembling step forward, hoping to get away from the sound without provoking whatever was behind me. The old floorboards creaked under my weight, and the breathing paused for just a moment, then started again, faster this time. Closer, I ran, through the hallway, past the living room, and into the bedroom. I slammed the door and locked it, pushing the dresser against it for good measure. Then silence. No footsteps, no breathing, just the faint ringing of the wind chimes outside, as if reminding me I had narrowly obeyed their rule without even trying. I stayed in the bedroom the rest of the night, sitting on the edge of the bed with a kitchen knife gripped tight in my hand. I didn't sleep. Every time my eyes grew heavy, I'd remember that empty mirror, the reflection that had vanished, and that thing breathing behind me. When the sun finally rose, I forced myself out into the hallway. The mirror was back to normal. I was in it again, alone. The second smile was gone. But now, etched into the mirror's glass in thin, shaky scratches, were 3 words: you blinked first. I barely ate that day. My stomach was too twisted with dread. I tried to stay busy, chopping firewood, cleaning the windows, even reorganizing the attic boxes, which strangely now looked like they hadn't been touched in years. There was dust again, thick layers of it, as if no one had ever come up there before. Except, in the far corner, I found something new. A small, cracked porcelain doll. It sat in a wooden box wrapped in faded velvet, one eye missing. A red thread stitched across its lips like someone had sewn them shut. Tied around its neck was a piece of paper yellowed with age. Do not remove the thread. It hears you. I put the lid back on the box and backed away, my hands clammy with sweat. I was beginning to feel like the house was growing around me, watching, reacting to my choices. The rules weren't just rules. They were chains, boundaries, warnings, and I was running out of chances. At exactly 4:44 p.m., I placed another saucer of milk on the porch. This time I didn't hesitate. I set it down, closed the door, and sat in the corner of the living room with my hands over my ears. But the sound still came through. Not footsteps this time. Laughter. Deep, rasping chuckles. Something amused. Something ancient. Then something heavy dragged across the porch floorboards. A wet sound, like something being pulled by limbs. Then nothing. At 5:10 p.m., the saucer was gone, but a new item had been left behind. A child's drawing. Crayon on paper, crude and messy. It showed the cottage drawn in shaky lines. A stick figure stood in the window, and beside it a figure made entirely of jagged black shapes with a red smile scribbled across its face. I stared at it for a long time. Then I burned it. That night, I lit candles in every room. I didn't care how ridiculous I looked. I needed the light. I needed to see every shadow, every corner, every angle of every mirror. The radio hadn't spoken in days, but just after midnight, it came back on. One will knock, one will smile, one will speak. You must choose which one to face. I didn't understand. Choose? How? And then almost on cue, knock from the back door 3 times, slow, heavy. I closed my eyes, my thoughts spiraled. The knocker, the smiler, the speaker. I remembered the child in the woods, the shadow in the mirror, the whispers that knew my name. Was this the choice? I stood in the hallway, heart pounding. Then I heard the smile again. Yes, heard it. That faint, wet stretch of a mouth curving too wide, coming from the mirror. And from outside in the distance, barely audible, I heard her voice, the girl, calling my name, softly, sweetly, almost pleading. Please let me in. I'm so cold. She was the speaker. The shadow in the mirror was the smiler, and the knock, the one at the back door, was still waiting. The rules had told me what to avoid, but they hadn't told me what to do when all 3 showed up at once. I couldn't face all of them, so I had to choose. I thought hard. The knock was terrifying, but so far, harmless, as long as I didn't open the door. The girl had nearly spoken to me before. That had been a warning, but the mirror? The mirror had already taken something from me. So I ran to the back door and stood just beyond reach of the handle. I whispered, "You win," and I unlocked it. The door creaked open by itself. Nothing was there, just empty woods, no footprints, no sound, just wind. But when I turned around, the hallway mirror had shattered. pieces of glass scattered across the floor like broken ice. And in each shard, I saw a different version of myself, some smiling, some screaming, some bleeding. But one wasn't human at all. I stared at the shards of broken glass strewn across the floor, unable to move, unable to breathe. Each piece reflected a different version of me, some crying, others lifeless, one grinning wide with hollow eyes. But in the largest shard near the edge of the hallway, something else stared back. Not me. Its skin was stretched too tightly over its face, too pale, almost gray. Its eyes were solid black, its lips thin and cracked. And then it moved, independent of me. It tilted its head slowly, curiously, like it was studying prey. Then it smiled, the third smile. A sound rose up in my throat, something between a whimper and a scream. I backed away, but the hallway suddenly felt longer than before, like the walls were stretching, breathing. The air vibrated, the kind of low hum you feel in your bones more than your ears. From the center of the mirror shards, a single droplet of thick black liquid dripped onto the wooden floor. Then another, and another. They formed a puddle that began to spread unnaturally fast, seeping toward my feet, eating away the wood grain like acid. I ran, no hesitation this time, straight into the kitchen and slammed the door shut behind me. I grabbed the fireplace poker from the stand and held it tight in both hands, trying to steady my breath. I didn't know what I had unleashed, but I had chosen. I'd opened the back door to avoid the smile, and it had broken free anyway. At dawn, I walked cautiously back to the hallway. The puddle was gone. The mirror shards gone. Not even a trace of glass. But something had changed. The mirror was whole again. Not repaired. Whole. Like it had never broken in the first place. Only now the reflection wasn't of the hallway behind me. It showed a room I didn't recognize. A long, narrow corridor lined with doors, each one marked with a symbol. A hand, a key, an eye, a flame. And at the end of the corridor stood a door with no handle. Only a slit like a mouth, and that smile again, carved into the wood. I blinked and the image vanished, just the hallway again, but I knew it wasn't over. Later that day, I opened the kitchen drawer and found something I hadn't placed there. A letter. Different handwriting this time. Scratchy, chaotic. It read, "You are the key now. It cannot be locked away again. The girl is not a girl. The knock was the warning. The mirror was the door, and you opened it." No signature. But scrawled in red ink on the back of the page were 4 new rules. 1. If you see yourself outside the window, do not let it see you back. 2. If the clock stops ticking, lie face down and cover your ears. 3. When the lights flicker in a perfect rhythm, count to 13. Do not lose count. 4. Do not sleep in the cottage again. I folded the letter with trembling fingers. My hands were shaking. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was part of something. A cycle. A trap. A curse? That evening, I packed my bags. I had made it through nearly 5 days in the cottage. The initial job posting said 1 month, but I couldn't stay another night. Not after the smile. Not after the mirror. I didn't care if they never paid me. I just wanted out. At sunset, I made one final check of the property. I was careful not to glance too long in any mirror or reflective surface. I didn't answer the faint sound of my name being whispered from the woods. I left another saucer of milk on the porch and closed the door without looking back. But when I got into my car and turned the key, the engine didn't start. It didn't even try. The battery was fine. The lights came on. The radio sparked to life instantly. Only static. Then a voice broke through. "You chose the knock, but the smile is patient. It waits." The car doors locked on their own. Then I saw it, standing at the edge of the woods, myself. Or something that wore my skin. Its stance was wrong, unnatural, its limbs too long, its head tilted too far to the left, and even from across the clearing I could see the grin. That third, impossible grin. I closed my eyes, heart pounding. "If you see yourself outside the window, do not let it see you back." I ducked low in the seat, trying not to breathe too loud. The radio continued whispering. "You opened the door. You invited it in. Now it wants more." I stayed in the car until well past midnight, gripping the steering wheel like a lifeline. Eventually, the doors unlocked on their own with a soft click. When I looked back toward the woods, it was gone. At dawn, I made one last decision. I left the house key on the porch. I left the binder on the table. I walked. No bags, no phone, just the clothes on my back and my boots on my feet. Miles of forest, no roads, just wilderness. I kept walking until I saw the edge of the trees begin to thin. But before I crossed the final line between forest and field, I looked back, just once. And there it was, the cottage. Only it looked different now. The wood darker, the windows black, no wind, no sound, and someone was standing on the porch, waving. It looked like me, but I didn't wave back. The cottage stood deathly quiet that night. The old wind chimes, which had once filled the air with a soothing tinkle, were still. No wind dared to whisper through the thick trees. The entire landscape felt as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something unspeakable to happen. I sat inside the living room, barely breathing, clutching the rule book in my hands like it was the only thing keeping me alive. The fire had long died out in the hearth, leaving only flickering embers that mirrored my own fading sense of control. Rule number 9 had just been fulfilled, and with it, something ancient had been set in motion. A low hum began to vibrate through the floorboards. It was not mechanical or earthly. It sounded like the moaning of something buried deep in the soil, something clawing its way up through the foundation. I grabbed the rule book, flipping frantically through the pages. That's when I found it. A final rule written in faded ink, nearly invisible unless the light hit it just right. Rule number 10. When the house itself begins to mourn, you must enter the attic and light the forgotten lantern. Do not speak. Do not hesitate. Do not look at her. I stared at those words, my hands trembling. I hadn't even known there was an attic. In all my time here, I'd never seen a way up. But now, almost as if summoned, a hatch in the ceiling creaked open on its own in the hallway just outside the bedroom. A rope ladder slowly unfurled, touching the floor softly. I swallowed the rising bile in my throat and stepped toward it. My legs felt heavy as stone. Every step closer to the attic felt like I was walking toward my own grave. The hum beneath the cottage was louder now, and I could hear faint whispers through the cracks in the walls. They were calling my name. I reached the ladder and climbed. The attic was pitch black. It smelled of mold, wax, and something far worse, something metallic and old. My flashlight flickered as I held it forward, illuminating dozens of strange artifacts, dolls with missing eyes, broken picture frames, yellowed lace dresses hung from wooden beams, and in the center, sitting atop a dusty pedestal, was a tarnished iron lantern. It looked ancient, almost alive. My hand shook as I lifted it. Inside was a single half-melted candle. I struck a match and brought it to the wick. The moment the flame caught, a gust of icy wind blew through the attic, slamming the hatch shut behind me. I fell back, nearly dropping the lantern, and then I saw her. She stood at the far end of the attic, just beyond the edge of the light. Dressed in a decaying white gown, her head tilted slightly to one side. Her face was obscured by a veil, but I could feel her gaze slicing through the air, through the fabric, straight into my soul. I remembered the rule. Do not look at her. But it was too late. My eyes had locked on hers for a fraction of a second, and she smiled. The attic floor groaned beneath me, and the wood warped unnaturally as her figure began to float forward, silent and slow. I backed up, holding the lantern tightly, its flame dimming with every step she took. Shadows crawled along the walls, alive and watching. I whispered apologies under my breath, pleading to whatever spirits haunted this place. Then, just as the lantern flickered one final time, everything went still. A voice, clear and calm, echoed in the attic. The final rule has been broken. I braced myself, but nothing happened. Instead, the attic light burst into an ethereal glow, and the woman vanished. The old artifacts around me began to dissolve into dust. The smell of decay lifted. The hatch creaked open again. I climbed down, lantern still in hand, back into the hallway, where the house was warm and quiet once more. The hum was gone. The walls were no longer bleeding shadows. The floorboards no longer trembled. Something had changed. I returned to the living room and placed the lantern on the mantel above the cold fireplace. The rule book, still in my pocket, had a final note scribbled at the end in fresh ink. You've lasted 7 days. You are now the keeper. It is your duty to guard the cottage, memorize the rules, enforce them, and never, ever leave. I stared at those words, heart sinking. Keeper. I rushed to the front door and flung it open. There was no forest anymore, only a wall of mist stretching endlessly in every direction. I wasn't in Oklahoma anymore. I was in Lost Creek now, where time, space, and sanity no longer followed normal laws. The cottage had taken me, as it had taken others before me, and now I was part of it. The lantern flickered behind me. Somewhere upstairs, the attic creaked once more, and I knew someone else would come. Soon, they would find the rule book on the table, just like I did, and they'd have to follow the rules, or face what lies waiting in the attic. The end. Wow. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. What would you do if you found yourself at Lost Creek Cottage? Thanks for watching this chilling tale on Dr. Snooze, where nightmares come to life. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your fellow horror lovers, and of course, subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next terrifying episode. Until next time, sleep tight and don't ignore the rules. Dr. Snooze, signing off.